Hello and welcome to Solutions for Stress. In episode 10, together with Peter Kelly from the HSE, we discussed about stress in organizations, the costs and benefits of managing stress, and about the signs that employees can show when stressed. If you're an English speaker, I would advise you to skip the next 20 seconds, as this is when the Romanian intro is gonna be played. Salut și bine ai venit la Soluții pentru stres! În episodul 10, împreună cu Peter Kelly de la HSE, organizația echivalentă ITMului din România, am discutat despre stresul din organizații, despre costurile și beneficiile ce apar atunci când stresul este manageriat și despre simptomele pe care angajații le pot avea atunci când sunt stresați.
A stressed employee will be someone that's actually not functioning at 100%, and they need to have a conversation. An organization that is struggling with stress at an organization level is an organization that's struggling. But it doesn't. You can start looking out for your mates and your colleagues, like you do your family, and like you do your friends outside of work. There's nothing logical to go, oh God, I'm in work, I'm going to be an emotional robot.
Thank you again for accepting my invitation. This meeting proves to be very challenging to start with. What I've started doing with the people that with the guests on my podcast, the first question is how would themselves describe what they do and who they are. So how would Peter describe Peter?
So I'm a psychologist. I'm a government psychologist, and I've spent the last 24 years working in the area of organizational stress prevention and mental health. And so that's probably a good description. I'm a mental health advocate. I strongly believe in the right to stay healthy at work, mentally and physically.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I know you are passionate about longboards.
And I have a longboard, yes, behind me. Obviously, because this is a webcast, you won't see the longboard.
No, it looks great. It looks awesome.
As you can see, the longboard is there.
It's still there. Any injuries? Recent injuries with that?
No, just one fall in about 4 months. So yeah.
Good.
It was all right.
Good. Keep up with that number. So you've been witnessing stress in organizations for the last 20 years. A number that shows up on the HSE website, it's about 800,000 people.
828,000.
828,000 people suffering from depression, anxiety, and mental health.
Stress, depression, and anxiety.
Yeah. Sorry. How did we get here? Like, how did this number came up in the last, or what was the progression of this number in the last 20 years? Is it better? Is it worse?
We started at 6 million. We thought it was a crisis in 95. Then we had 9 million in 1999. And then we got actively involved in the area with the government of the time to look at helping to manage stress at a national level. And then we launched in 2004, and we were at 12 million days lost to work, 12.9 million days lost to work-related stress. Because we did something by 2006, that had dropped down to 9 million. So when you're active in the area, it does have an impact on stress cases. After that, 2006 to 2010, there was a gradual increase. Then there's a recession in 2010. Now, recessions always impact people's health, and there's often a bubble after the recession when mental health is impacted. And so we'd seen that as expected. And then over the last 10 years, we've seen a proliferation of individual, what we would call the tertiary interventions. So tertiary being at the individual level, mostly to treat rather than to actually prevent, or to try and make the person stronger, resilient, mindful, etc. My only primary issue is this: is it doesn't address, and I say the primary issue is it doesn't address the fact that work in itself may create the conditions that are right for people to experience work-related stress, depression, and anxiety. Because if we constantly seek to default to changing the individual's mindset through mindfulness or their emotions through resilience, and then we put them back into an organization that is toxic, then we find ourselves essentially putting people back into environments that will ultimately impact their health. An illustration I used before, and this is a true story, is I had some goldfish in my pond. They kept on dying, and I got my pond man around, and he said, "Oh, Pete, your water's just minging. It's full of filth." And I said, "Well, why is that?" He said, "Because the filth has not been cleaned." And so it wasn't the fish. I hadn't created the right environment for those fish to survive in. So, and in terms of stress, that's what we're looking at. If we want strong, we want these people to be our resilient mindfulness, but we don't create the right environment for them to be sustained in that, then mental ill health is an outcome. I think it's important to differentiate between the two. And mental health, is, the presence of things that make you psychologically well and keep you sustained. So if you're looking to improve people's mental health, you're doing that because there's a benefit to having happy, healthy people in work. Mental ill health is the consequence of poorly managed work. And I think that's the bit, so in the context of work-related stress, people become stressed because they're in an environment that maybe isn't actually actively trying to reduce what we would call the sources of stress, the hazards. So high demands, low control, low support, poor relationships, lack of role clarity, change programs that don't take into consideration people's personal mental health. Or not even the personal mental health. They just don't think, well, what's the consequence of doing what I'm doing? So
every activity has a result and a consequence. So if you're a director and you want to get to a result, you need to be mindful of the impact that activity has on your people.
You can't assume that you can't assume that just because you want something done, people are going to do it. You've got to create the environment in which people will do it. The director that requires people to do things but doesn't take into consideration the impact on the employees is a transactional management style, and we know transactional management style has predominantly been preferred in some sectors and organizations because it's a belief that you need to be robust, strong, and do as I tell you to do. Now, the successful companies across globally that have other aspects to them which make them successful, and those other aspects is that they actually manage their people. They manage their people's expectations, their roles, their demands, their controls, and they put appropriate support in. And these people feel compelled to work with that organization because they're looking after them. And I think that's really important. We've got a lot of people that don't want to do stress and don't want to do mental ill health because it's in the too hard category. Well, they probably will be the organizations that won't be here in 10 years from now.
Yeah, I see not a lot of companies, but I see some companies who say that we've been doing this for 20 years and they think they're going to do it for another 20 years. And the fact that they are still here, that is not because of their it's not because they are good at managing people is because other factors keep them in the game.
Well, those factors is they behave like everyone else, which is, not everyone else, maybe in that particular area of that sector. The problem that we've got is many of the, and it's not a problem, but I think it's a real catalyst for change. Many of us now work in a different way. And we've been working in a different way for nearly 15 years since the advent of computers, and which is 30 years, 35, 40 years ago. iPhones are now nearly 20 years, about 20 years since the first iPhone, and Samsungs. So, what's interesting is assume that 20 years ago when I first started at HSC, I didn't have a phone that was capable of me getting emails on. And it was about 21, because in 20 years ago, the Blackberries came out. And so the problem is technology has advanced in a way, and we've buried ourselves in technological advances, but we've not looked at how the worker and the technology link in together. So
that's one of the questions I have, but it's down on the list. Before we go there, how does a stress employee looks like, and how does a stressful company looks like?
A stress employee will be someone that's actually not functioning at 100%, and they need to have a conversation. An organization that is struggling with stress at an organization level is an organization that's struggling. Because really, everything you do, so processes and systems you have, rely on an interaction between you and the operator. And if you not taking into consideration the operator's mental well-being, and you're effectively making them ill by the things that you do. So we're talking about what a person who suffers from work-life stress will say. You lose out. You find yourself in a position where it becomes difficult to manage. So they look pretty much the same, and it's not a good place.
No, it's not. Why was it important for you personally when you started this journey? Why was it important to look at stress? You could have chosen any other topics, but why was stress so important for you?
I worked as a clinical psychologist before I came into this area, and the people I was seeing at my clinics in the on a Wednesday and a Friday afternoon all had very similar presentations, depression, anxiety, but probably when you were spending time with them, about 50% of those had things that were going on at work. And work was a contributing factor, not the main factor. In some cases, it was the main factor. And it made me think, well, actually, why, if we know about psychology and about human behavior, why are we not looking at human behavior from the perspective of prevention rather than cure? As an agent of change, where you help to bring people through depression and anxiety, you cure them. But what we need to be thinking about, well, if these people are being made ill at work, why are we not looking at work and seeing it as part of the equation? And what can we do to change that? Always believe that work has a huge impact on our sense of who we are. When you go out and you meet someone for the first time, they say, my name's Peter Kelly, and I am, and they're very key words. I am a psychologist. So we identify with the roles.
Yeah, that's your identity.
And it's an identity. And actually, so if you got stuff going wrong in work, then it's the knock-on effect that it impacts your identity of what you're doing in work, and also has an impact on your home, an impact on your relationships, your friends, your relationships at work. But everyone's gone, well, this is a really difficult area. We can't really touch it. Well, at 828,000 days lost to work-related stress, depression, and anxiety, and 17.9 million days lost. That's 17.9 million days. That's the most days lost to any health and safety condition since we've started taking records and since the Act in 1974. So what we've got, and that's 1 week into the pandemic, that's excluding what's gone on in the pandemic. So that's only just 1 week into the pandemic. What we've got is a sea change culturally of the way people do business. And we've got this proliferation of individual tertiary interventions because it's cheap, and that's the simplest fact. It's cheaper to change the person than to actually change the organization. Well, that's the logic. The point is, if you extrapolate the actual true loss to the organization, you'll find it's way cheaper to do the intervention that you want to do because it will benefit you. The cost benefits are there. Very often, an alteration in a working practice for a group of workers who are experiencing stress will have limited impact on the financial bottom line. But what it does have is an impact on the financial upline, because if their people are happy and their people are healthy, then they will do that. They'll work better. They'll have a more structured and effective workplace.
And we're not saying that mindfulness training or resilience training, they're not good. They do help. It's better.
Yes, yeah. Then they should. All what I would say is they shouldn't be used in isolation.
Yeah.
And we've got a literature review from 2007 by Anthony Lamontagne, looking at a critical review of interventions, and what they found was individual tertiary interventions in themselves don't have the same level of impact as those which are what we call the primary organizational and secondary, which is training people to be good managers and better, Yeah. And actually, if you think about the whole mental health and well-being agenda, it's a secondary intervention, isn't it? Because you're trying to promote positive mental health. You're trying to improve people's sense of well-being and purpose and create environments in which they thrive rather than which they're made ill. Currently, we have workplaces that incubate ill health and not actually incubate health. And work, as we discovered over the last 19, 20 months of this pandemic, is vitally important to people's sense of who they are, their identity. And actually, if you worked in an office, you've been thrown into your lounge, into your bedroom, or wherever. And what has come back through the pandemic is people miss people.
Yeah.
Even people you don't like.
No.
But you know what I mean? But people miss that contact, that human contact.
Yeah. And
I think, and we will know, those who are working in factories or who are in construction sites, they've been at work. But we do see those people that carried on working during the pandemic who were also experiencing quite strong psychological reactions to the pandemic. So it's, if you are in an office, highly unlikely for the next 2 years that you'll be in every day.
Nope, you're not going to be in there. And going back to the construction workers, I've had conversations with guys where they said they had enough. They've been working relentlessly for the last 18 months or whatever it was, with without a possibility of going on holiday or stopping. And they said, no, we had that. That's it. I've been working too much.
There's strong evidence of burnout amongst construction workers. There's been an increase, as we know, before the pandemic, there was an increase in suicide in the sector, and that's carried on. But I think, and what we need to do in the construction sector specifically is break down the stigma of talking about your mental health and it's manning up. The biggest thing to do to man up is to say, I'm struggling, because not saying you're struggling isn't manning up. It's actually, you know what I mean? It's actually hiding something which can be there. So I think there's a powerful incentive to sort of knock down and pull apart these ideas of of, men don't talk about mental health, or, one of the things I find fascinating as a psychologist is when I go into a predominantly male environment and there are females there, it's the change in the behavior of the men that are there to the fact that a woman's there. And I think that is a really positive thing. But why is that not occurring when in an all-male environment?
I think that
I've been to foundries where they've got women and men, and it's a different experience than other places where it's purely men.
I think the construction industry has welcomed recently more women's than in the past or before the pandemic, and hopefully they will help.
And women with in power and influence, and women that have got really strong health and safety backgrounds. There's some amazing health and safety directors out there, female directors, and why shouldn't it be?
Yeah.
This is not a gender issue. This is just about the right people being there. So I like the fact that the sector is changing and adapting. I like the fact that we're getting a cross section of people in there. So.
And I see for some of the jobs on site, ladies are better suited to do them rather than guys. Guys have less patience and less attention to details.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think that's an excuse on health and safety. Male or female, you can still attend and do the task. I think it's just part of the changing role of work. And long may it exist, you know what I mean?
So to sum up what we've discussed until now, the ISO 45003, can that be considered as a primary solution for managing stress?
Well, it's a safety management system.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 45,001, which is a safety management system for health and safety, 45,003 is effectively a management system for the management of psychological health, safety, and well-being at work. Not well-being, at work. And it's a recognition that psychological health and psychological safety have an influence on the outcome, both of physical conditions and on also safety outcomes.
Good. So
embedded in that is a primary, secondary, and tertiary, although it uses the hierarchy of control, which I'm sure you'll explain to your attendees before. Hierarchy of control at its earlier stage seeks to eliminate the risk. Seeks to eliminate the hazard. In the context of stress, you can't eliminate a highly stressful job which has multiple hazards, but you can control it. And that's what we're trying to do, is to find the areas where you've got control.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, you can't, like, if you're a firefighter or a police officer, you can't eliminate that. You can control them. And then
or if you're working in a factory which is automated and they don't, and you've got to pick up biscuits in that period of time. Now, I've watched I've been to places where I watch systems in work and I'm like, well, why are you doing that? Well, because we bought this system, but did you think about the operator? Did you think about the person? How's that going to work? So, yeah.
And then companies have the management system where they can teach that to their managers on how to manage the work better, and hopefully at the end they will have resilience training and mindfulness training for individuals.
Well, what I'd like them to be is organizationally resilient and organizationally mindful.
Not individually mindful. And
Well, if you want people to be mindful, then create the right organization. How do you do that? Being mindful as an organization of what you need to do to create the right environment. You want people resilient, then you need to be resilient in an organization, don't you? You need to draw in and look at the resources that you've got and find the best way of sort of delivering on the thing that you want to deliver on in a way that brings your people with them rather than takes them down at the same time. I think that so organizational resilience and mindfulness perhaps is what we should be asking people to talk about. Yeah.
That's a good topic. So rather than consuming the batteries, which are the people, charge them up with at work, so they can help you.
If you're going to be, why just have the battery? Why not have the, if you think of the electric cars, why not be the electricity point that recharges people?
Yeah. Why not? One of the questions that we had comes from a site manager and is very specific to the construction industry. Do you think, in terms of demands, the construction industry will ever go down from 10 hours of work to 8, like normal, like the other normal industry?
I know there are some companies and organizations that do an 8-hour shift. And they're more effective in delivering on time than perhaps the companies that are saying you're doing a 12-hour shift.
Good.
The 8-hour shift or the 8-hour principle, if you in the 1920s, there was Yerkes and Dobson's law, which talks about motivation, pressure, and that. What happens is we get pressure and it motivates us. So what we're describing here is something that's motivational. So I got these pressures, but it's okay. It's within my control. I can change. I can adapt. Stress comes when those pressures become too much. So when somebody says I've got positive stress, they don't have positive stress. They have positive pressure. Stress is always a perceived inability to achieve a desired goal. That's the definition that some people adhere to. And if that's the case, then it's going to be a negative, isn't it? So let's start talking about positive pressure. But the pressure argument is about getting it right. And I think that's really important, that actually, and that then leads you down to that role and about the timing and of what you're expected to do. So, yeah.
Hopefully there will be some changes. The second...
that was it. Yeah. So just remembered it. There's a formula that was produced in around, I think it was in the 1940s, and it points out 3 things. That we're meant to have 8 hours of cognitive stimulation. We function well on 8 hours. We need about 8 hours of doing something else, and we need 8 hours of sleep. So if there's a disproportionate time on it, or any 3 of them, then we're going to be impacted. If you're working a 12-hour shift and you're driving home, that's 13 hours, and you're back in, you're actually only asleep for 6 hours because you have to get up. And you're not going to be as effective.
No, you're not.
If you look on jobs, accidents that all occur towards the end of shifts.
Yeah.
Because people's concentration.
People want to go home, or they don't have the energy to do the work anymore. I think we've touched a bit on the second question. Comes from a lady, and she said that the construction industry should do something to change the mindset of men towards women in construction.
I mean, absolutely, and I think Mates in Mind has done some excellent work in this area. The Construction Federation has also done some work, and I believe that that is important. And I think the very as we said before, the presence of women on construction sites is wholly a brilliant thing that should have occurred many years ago. But actually, the more females that we get on to working on sites, the less I believe that these sort of negative experiences will become less and less, and it should be altered. If people don't feel comfortable, then it should be altered that this is not appropriate. Yep. It's not going to happen on this site. If you're the site subby, you're the supervisor, and about that, then stand up for the workers.
Yeah. No, we do stand up for our ladies, and they also can handle themselves quite well. They're not afraid.
Exactly. Probably better than those.
Yes.
Probably better than those, if I'm honest.
On our post on LinkedIn, we got a question about how we can, what would be some examples of countries or companies that have applied good management practices and got extraordinary results.
Well, there was a European project that looked at psychosocial risk assessment. And what we mean by psychosocial is psychological and social impacts at work. So when we talk about psychosocial, we're talking about psychological health and safety. So that's just for clarification. But in 2015, the European Union did run a campaign to identify organizations who had good practice in managing psychological health and safety risk. So it's a long-winded way around saying, yes, there is evidence. So, taking some of the large companies like multinational companies like Volkswagen and Deutsche Post, facilitated it okay for people to switch off their computer. They switched the servers off at 7 o'clock on a Friday and only let access to people who were on duty or in a supervisory capacity over that period of time. So they actually structurally did something that forced people to relax. And then if it's, in smaller organizations, it's way easier. You can identify almost, fairly quickly where your trigger points are. So you adjust your trigger points. If it's high demand because you've got a machine that's producing something and it's going way too quick or it's disproportionately faster than the operators can handle, you reduce the speed.
Exactly.
Because and then if I remember someone saying to me, well, if I reduce the speed, I lose 2% of my productivity. And I said, but you're losing 22% on sickness absence. So by reducing your speed, you've already saved 20%, which increases your profit margin. And they're like, so the point is, there are different examples, and it depends. If it's a lack of communication, you do innovative communication plans. I worked with the foundry sector, and we had a series of graphical images, which for good housekeeping actually, and now done stuff with mental health for them. And we said, would you do this at home? And then we had visual imagery of a foundry and a home merged together, asking the question, would you do this at home? Now, in the context of mental health and well-being, we have to seek to create workplaces that keep people healthy. And it's not a utopian dream. It can be a reality, but currently it's not acceptable in the 21st century to go to work, to come home ill all the time. There's something wrong where we can't do it. And there's also something fundamentally wrong on sites and other areas where we stop having the ability to talk about our emotions because it's not the big thing to do. And as I've already said, it is the big thing to do. Your emotions are just a part of you. I worked with a couple of lads on a construction firm. We were discussing mental health. So it's, this is all a little bit lightweight and soft. And I said, is it really? And they said, what do you do when your kid falls off his bike?
Yeah.
He said, well, I get it. I pick him up and then, tell him it's going to be all right and then get him back on it. And I said, what do you do when your mate has the same experience on a site? Whoa. And I said, what do you mean, whoa? You can do it for your family. If you can do it for your mates outside of work, why can't you ask the question? Bam just did a really excellent video, which is on my LinkedIn, on suicide, looking out for people. Okay, suicide is the most extreme end in terms of impact. But it doesn't. You can start looking out for your mates and your colleagues, like you do your family, and like you do your friends outside of work. There's nothing logical to go, oh God, I'm in work, I'm going to be an emotional robot.
Yeah, and when people Sorry.
with my time.
And if we would have had the same numbers on physical injuries, like imagine over 800,000 people with broken hands, people would have been outraged. Or imagine, I think the construction, the suicide numbers for construction, like construction related, it was about 400 at one point, and we only like the whole industry, the whole construction industry, not like in the whole of the UK, there were only 40 people that died that year of work-related accidents, and we had 400 people committed suicide in construction. And when I find out
affiliated either in construction or affiliated with construction, so I mean that, which means that the potentially the amount of people suffering from mental ill health or stress, work-related stress and anxiety and depression, it's substantial. But I don't need to tell you that, because you and I, you can walk around a construction site and tell the person who's really quite narked. I remember I was in London, and it was a 22 stack scaffolding around a building just down the road from one of our offices, and the guy at the top was absolutely losing it. I mean, totally losing it. And he was banging these scaffolding poles around. He was just properly narked. And I said to his supervisor, who was down in the cab that was involved, the crane, and I said, get him down, because he's more of a risk the way he is up there. And I said, you need to get him down, and tell him it's HSE and get him down, because he's going to hurt himself or hurt others.
But I believe that he was from your story, he was physically able to work, but mentally he had some.
Oh, he's physically able to work, but mentally he was a bit knocked.
Yeah.
Somebody had ticked him off in a big way, and I said to him, "Well, I really don't care. Get him down, because you can't have him up there like that." And actually, so you're looking for practical examples on a site. If someone's particularly loud and shouting at people and throwing things around, you need to ask yourself a question, because if they're not normally like that, something's not right. And here's the thing: if they are normally like that, then you still got to challenge it. Because that's not a good thing.
No, because that's why I've asked the question at the start: how does a stressed person look like? And that's how they look like. Their personality changes when our personality.
They can look like just me and you, and not actually share it. And I think that's the important thing. Like there's a stressed person kind of look. They can actually just, many people say, I never realized that they were experiencing stress. Never realized, because actually they're not encouraged to share that. So I don't think you can sort of pinpoint. You can tell that people are not in a great place.
Stress has an effect on our personality. If you're an extrovert, you'll be louder, you'll talk more, you'll be more kind of hyper. And then if you're an introvert, you'll be you'll be even quieter than you were before. So there are signs, but it's very hard to tell. I'm mindful of your time, and I'll just ask one last question. How much does it cost to apply the ISO 45000 standards and management standards?
If your organization earns less than 25 million, you can get it for free.
No. Like the actual implementation. This is like how much. If
the actual implementation is really no extra than what you should be already doing anyway. We're clear under the management regs for that, and obviously the Health and Safety at Work Act Section 2, protect your workers' health and safety, and Reg 3, do a risk assessment, Reg 5, do something about the results of the risk assessment in its simplest form. You need to prove and show to me as a regulator and as an inspector that you've managed the risk. So you have to risk assess that risk, because you're required under Section 3 to do that. So 45,003, what it does with the management standards is give you a template. The management standards shows you how to risk assess. It gives you the information about how to have conversations with your individual employees. 45,003 adds the extra element of putting in place a system, a psychological health and safety system. And that's what it does. So it guides you through the kind of things you need to be looking at. Can-do act is embedded in the process.
Yeah, because hopefully people don't understand that this is another cost to their organization, or it costs them a huge amounts of money, time, and resources.
The cost is already huge, isn't it? Because you got people off, they're costly.
Yeah. Because they're not working, or if they come at work, they'll do mistakes, or they're not going to be focused.
As a general rule of thumb, it's about 4 times the salary cost. So it's the cost
for a stressed person.
So basically, and that incorporates the loss in productivity, retraining of people, using additional people to do that role, impact on productivity. So if you're earning 30,000 a year and you got somebody off for 3 months, then it isn't 7,000 that you're losing 28. So in 3 months, you're losing nearly the full salary cost of that person.
And we're not trying to scare anybody. This is what happens. This is what happened within companies where people were off sick because of stress.
These are figures now. And refer that back to doing health promotion, mental health promotion. Return on investment for £1 is 7. So where's the benefits? Clearly, improving people's psychological health and well-being can show on a 1 in 7 return on investment, whereas not focusing on elements of improving their mental health and well-being, be it structurally and at an individual level, it leads you one way. Sickness absence leads to higher costs. Higher costs lead to issues that therefore increase the probability that people are going to be put under more pressure.
Yeah.
So, but I think, simple things, as we said, talking to people, having, making this a normal part of conversation. Don't go into a meeting and go, we're going to just do depression and anxiety and stress today. You go into a meeting and you just chat to people. Yeah. You allow them to talk about what's doing their head in, is the best description of somebody once said to me. It's doing me head in. And I said, well, right, let's talk about it then. Yeah. And then I sometimes will say to people, how are you traveling? It's an Australian expression. Yeah, I'm okay, a bit bumpy, So on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? If and then if you're 10, you're flying, It's a smooth road. If you're 5, there might be some bumps there. And if you're 1, car ain't moving because you're probably stuck in the sand in the desert.
And then there's gonna be some snakes, scorpions, and eagles flying around you, and they will get you at one point.
In America, yes. In Australia, no. We did get one with my mum. I got stuck in the Nullarbor Plains, and there is nothing there, except really big spiders, and some of the biggest kangaroos you've ever seen in your life.
I don't like Australia. I think I want to stay as far away as from Australia as possible.
It's a great country.
I think we both agree that the future looks bright, and I think companies should realize that they have the necessary means to do what's right for both their survival.
I think that the statement would be it could be right. Could be bright. I'm still not convinced unless we really take this seriously. As I said recently, this is a once in a generational event. It's actually not even that. The last major influenza pandemic was 1918. It's once in 100 years.
Yeah, in 2 generations.
What we know from 1918 and subsequent pandemics is people's mental health is impacted. And what we really know is over the last 2 years, people's mental health has been impacted. Remember this, Alex, the 14-year-old kids that were at school are the 16-year-old apprentices that are turning up on site.
Oh.
And they've had 18 months of being not in school, being at their most formative times. They're going to come into work, and you're going to need to support and help those younger workers. And then you've got all of the other people that have gone through the NHS has got 48% sickness absence at the moment. Okay. We were clapping for the workers, for the key workers and for the NHS. And we did it for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then what did we do? There is a global crisis in physician burnout and in healthcare workers. And there is an increase in depression and anxiety and stress on construction sites. And it will be there, and that's the reason I think it will sit with us for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do? We're just going to teach people to be resilient and mindfulness.
We're going to give them fruit bowls.
We give them fruit bowls, massage, mindfulness, and resilience, and go, you're going to be all right. None of that helped.
No.
When we went into lockdown, did it?
No, it didn't.
Your resilience helped you a bit, but when you didn't get the support because you were in lockdown and doing that, where did your resilience go? Yeah,
you went down. You went really down. Mindfulness, the same thing. People's mindful. People weren't mindful of what they were doing. I know people who worked more during the lockdown than at work. Like 80, instead of working 8 hours in an office, they worked 12 in their kitchen. That's
that is why high demand, low control, low support, the Karasek's model for stress is so fundamentally the same, as is effort reward imbalance by Segrist.
Yeah.
The effort I put in and the reward I get back is less. Now in the pandemic, that's been really self-evident. There is another model called the job demands resource model by Dammer and Bakkeruti. Bakker and Dammery, sorry. And in that, it's the same principle. Is that, what are the resources we have to manage the risk? Again, another model developed outside of a pandemic, but very applicable to what we're going through.
They say this was a very, very good conversation. Thank you, Peter. Where can people find you?
You'll find me on LinkedIn, or I think there are YouTube videos as well. So
they're gonna find you on your podcast.
And then the psychological and health and safety podcast.
The UK version and also the Australian version, right?
That's right. Yeah. So Jason Vanchi and Flourish DX does the Australian version. Sheila from BMR Health and myself do the English version. And Jason has he kicked it off with him and his colleagues, and it's been great.
Awesome. Good. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your hard work in the last 20 years.
I should say Jason and Jolie.
Jason and Jolie, yes.
I was struggling to remember her name. She's going to kill me for not remembering. It's because they're both J's. And it's really
no pressure there. No pressure. Thank you very much for your time. I know we've kind of went over our limit, and
but you can maybe make two podcasts out of it or something like that.
Yeah. So we'll stop the recording here. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope the information provided will bring some value into your life. And if you liked what you heard, please share it with others. Dacă ai ajuns până la finalul discuției, țin să te felicit și să îți mulțumesc. Sper că ai găsit utile aceste informații din podcast și dacă nu, spune-ne. Vrem să aflăm de la tine, cel care ne asculți, cum putem să devenim mai buni pentru ca aceste episoade să îți fie de folos.